Okay, so we're recording. So welcome everybody. This is our second to last shiur, actually. We're gonna have next week will be the last shiur. Can you believe that we did all of these simanim? Amazing. We actually have important siman today, which is about Nat Bar Nat, you all know. So without further ado, let's start with the Gemara in Kulin Kuf Yud Aleph. Carve pots and dishwashers here. Yeah, well, we should mention something about the dishwasher. Yeah. Just changing the view here. So we're in Kuf Yud Aleph, and there's this Gemara here. You guys get? Did you notice I sent out a Rashi Girsa? That's from the Oz Vahadar Talmud. They print that there. Not that I have it, but I have it. I saw it. Should get it. Anyway, because this Rashi we're going to see is very problematic. Anyway, let's look at this Gemara. Okay, Jessica's coming in. Maybe Lexi, you want to read the beginning of this Gemara? Itmar dagim sha'alu b'kara.
Yeah, 1 second, just pulling it up.
This is
approximately 10 seconds. If there's somebody who already has it, they can start off.
10 seconds, we can wait.
Okay. Itmar. Dagim shalu b'kara, Rav amar asor le'achlam b'kutach, u'Shmuel amar mutar le'achlam b'kutach. Okay, so we have this Emoraic dispute. Fish that, let's say, were placed hot in a meaty bowl. Rav says it's usher to eat them with kutach, this milky yogurt dish that they would eat, and Shmuel says it's mutter. Rav Amar.
Wait, so look at Rashi. Look at Rashi.
Right. So Rashi on this dagim
shalu b'kara.
Min hatzlik shayu rotchin nan netoch kara shachlu babasar. Right. So you have very hot cooked fish while they're still like boiling are placed inside of a bowl where meat had been eaten.
The bowl is cold, right? And it's when Rashi says it came from Sli, is that important how it got hot?
At this point, with this explanation, I think no. I think at this, according to when you're placing it in the bowl, if it's roasted or boiled, either way, the point is that it
doesn't matter how it got hot, right? Exactly. In other words, when it was from the Sli, was it on a meat skewer? Or what are we assuming about the status of the fish in the Sli?
Well, Dafka, according to the way Rashi is explaining it here, it seems like no. Like we're assuming it's not on a meat skewer. It was on a part of her dairy or whatever, and now it's being placed on a clean meat bowl.
So the only moment that it has any interaction, it becomes meat, is when it's on this cold plate.
Right.
But we've got two
like at most, also in this scenario, right? Like the most you could have any kind of flavor penetration is kadeh klipa, because it's like, a tata agavar situation. But we do still say that there is potential of some amount of flavor transfer, right? So to the extent that we think there is meaty flavor in this ka'ara, as long if the fish is hot, alu min hatzli or mina bishul, and it's being placed here, then it could absorb some amount of flavor theoretically from that meaty bowl, right?
We'll read the next Rashi.
So asor le'achlam b'kutach, according to Rav, lefisha basar noten lahem tam, right? So the explanation of why Rav would say it's a problem is that these are going to receive flavor from the meat flavor that's in the ka'ara, and so you'll have some meaningful presence of meat flavor in the fish. Hence why you can't.
And the next Rashi.
Well, we didn't read that in the Gemara yet. Rav amar asor noten asor noten tamhu, u'Shmuel amar mutar noten tam bar noten tamhu. Right, explaining their reasonings. Rav says it's usher to eat it with kutach because this is the case where you have flavor. That like there's meaningful flavor presence of meat that'll then interact with the kutach. And Shmuel says, no, it's permitted because it's actually a separate step removed, right? That you have flavor from the meat to the bowl to the fish, and then from, whatever would be left from the fish to the kutach.
What's the svara of Rav? What's the svara of Rav?
The svara of Rav seems to be that like the flavor that's going to be imparted to the fish from this bowl is going to be meaningful enough that it would be probably that like you are meaningfully having a bisari flavored thing with kutach, and that's like not permitted, right? And Shmuel is saying that like by the time that gets to the fish, it is like a diluted enough flavor that we don't really consider that to be meaningfully meat presence anymore.
Right. Yeah, that actually matches up well with Rav and Chanan. You could say that the fish has become chanab, right? Like it's no longer a fish; it's a meat fish, and so when it touches the kutach, this is a direct basar b'chalav contact.
Right. Only at least to the kadei klipa, right? So let's wait. So let's exactly.
Wait,
so let's look
does
at...
Rav say Chanan about just basar itself? That seems to stretch.
No, I that's why I call that chanab.
Okay, all right.
It's not a real principle. I just did that.
Right. It's really just that you're.
Well, but
what would be the problem?
the whole point though is that
I mean, let's say there is flavor of meat in the fish, and you ate it with your kutach. Are you doing any yisser? What yisser are you doing?
I mean, something that I think comes up in the Rama also is he points out that like everyone, or maybe this comes up in the Beit Yosef actually, that like everyone would have to agree that if you like took a klipa from the fish, of course you could eat it because then there would be just literally nothing, right? In the case of sha'alu b'kara, where it's a hot fish on a cold kara, right? Or even vice versa, right? Where if it was like a hot kara, but like a cold fish, where again, we get into this, they said that would only be a netzilat makom, right? That like, in that case, if you took it, it would be fine because the flavor is not pashet, right? That like the obvious thing we're dealing with is like, yes, we think that the heat interaction would theoretically have the capacity to transfer something. We're not removing that area. We're saying, is whatever was transferred significant enough that's going to prevent me from eating this with dairy or not? And again, Rav's answer is it should, because it would only be at worst like a level derabanan iser, because obviously there's no cooked together meat and dairy, right? They're interacting in your mouth in a cold way, but you're eating meat and dairy together with no separation. They're in your mouth together.
All right, Yavni, can you read the Rashi, next Rashi?
Sure. Hang on, let me just find it. Sorry. What's the
Noten
diploma
tam
here?
bar noten
Noten
tam.
נותן טעם בר נותן טעם הוא, אם היו מבושלים עם בשר ממש, היה אסור לאוכלן בכותח. So in other words, if they had been actually cooked with meat, then it would be forbidden to eat them with the yogurt.
But this is a case where it was not cooked with meat.
Right.
But I have a question. If it was cooked with meat, would it always be usher to eat it with kutach?
If it was cooked with meat.
Depends on the tanarim.
Yeah, what's the havamina of Rashi taking care of? Yeah. Why did he have to tell us this? Why? Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, he's trying to contrast it with this case. That's all. Just saying, if it was cooked with
I know,
meat,
but you're asking that question. I think you're asking what Rashi was thinking about. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So what? So if it was, is it always usher if you cook it with meat to eat it with kutach?
What do you mean cooked with?
I mean a piece of meat in the pot when it was ahana kli rishon.
Right. It seems like, for example, if you had fish in like a stew with meat and then you like removed the fish, right? Even though there's no longer physical meat present, it seems like everyone would agree you can't eat that fish because it is so permeated with the immediate meaty
Is there
flavor.
any time when it would be permitted?
Oh, if there were beetle, you mean? If there were...
Yeah. What if it was bittel? What if it was bittel? What if the meat was very small? Is Rashi saying that it's always forbidden? Rashi doesn't say that. He says, if it was cooked with meat, he seems to be saying it's always usher. So go, Joel, you want to say something?
I think you can take it one of two ways. One is you can say, because there's no beetle, because there's no isur, right? That anytime it's cooked with meat, right? That it's a question of how much milk there is against the meat and the meat that was absorbed by the fish, and not a question of how much fish there was against the meat, right?
Mm.
The beetle doesn't kick into effect until you have the mixture. So
You're
yeah,
saying there's no bittul of a het there. And so you're
exactly.
saying if you cooked meat with, but what if you don't taste it? I mean, the Torah only prohibits tam, right?
So there's no time kikar at that point. Yeah, but the other version of it would be you could maybe
What would be the prohibition of eating it with kutach if there's no tam?
Well, you could say l'chachila, it's aser l'chachila to cook even with shisha.
So we could, so what other halacha that we know?
where there's no time, but you can't do it lechatchila.
Yeah, where something is really permitted, but you can't do it anyway.
Tam lifgam.
No, okay. I was thinking of Devar sheyesh lo matirin.
Mhm.
Devar sheyesh lo matirin. It's really batel. It's really totally batel. But a feel elef, you could have a tiny drop of something that you have another way to eat it, right? According to Rashi, at least, if you have another way to eat it, then why should we let you eat it in a way that's us, or let you eat it in a way that's mutter? That's the Devar sheyesh lo matirin. So maybe this is like a kind of Devar sheyesh lo matirin. The other alternative is to say that Rashi is saying the opposite. Is that Rashi is saying that only when there's time here are we forbidding it. Only when there's time. And then you have to say that the idea of noted tam lifgam only comes into effect when the time is perceivable. In other words, this is a big question I have. My big question is, what's bothering me, which is, there's two ways to learn this whole sugya. Is noted tam lifgam a din that says, even when there's no flavor, sorry, not noted tam, not bar nat. If there's no flavor and it's not bar nat, we'll permit it. But if there's no flavor and it's not bar nat, it's one nat, then it's forbidden. That's one way of learning. Or we could say no. We could say when there's no flavor, there's no prohibition. But when there is a flavor, then we say, but what kind of flavor is it? Is it a weakened flavor? Even though it's perceived, if you'd ask a Eino Yehudi or even a Jew to taste it, he would perceive it. But it's a kalush, what's called a tam kalush. And therefore, it's permitted to eat it with milk, but it's still a tam. And I think that's actually the way to learn it. Yeah, Joel, you want to say something?
Well, I think the other way is Rashi's clarifying, because we don't know from Shmuel what not bar nat actually is. I think there is a havamina to say not bar nat is the basar to the fish to the kutach. And Rashi's saying that's not, I was going to be very confused. That's not bar nat, right? Because you could say that.
Say it again. I don't understand what you're saying.
That someone could claim, since the fish wasn't the original source of the basari flavor, that if you cook fish with basar, there's a havamina to say that it went the flavor from the basar to the fish, and from the fish to the kutach, or from the maybe even to the kutach to the kara, right? That would be not bar nat. And Rashi saying, no, if it's actually cooked with the meat, you can't start claiming not bar nat at that point. The fish is like meat.
Yeah, well, for sure, if it's cooked with the meat, you can't. But I don't understand your havamina.
I think the havamina is to say that that's not the case, right? That we don't know what he means by not bar nat. And so just in case, don't mess up to think that if it's cooked with the meat, that it's already second degree.
Okay, all right. And in any case, all right, let's simplify things. And let's just say that what we're saying here is that there is a flavor, but the flavor is if it's direct, then you can't eat it with kutach, because rabbinically, we're not going to let you eat milk and meat together. And then read the next part of Rashi, Yavni. Inami.
אינמי מודה שמואל שאסור לאכול חלב רותח בקערה. חלב רותח בקערה דנותן טעם ראשון הווה כבשר גמור.
So in other words, you can't put hot milk into a kara of a fleshik kara, because that's tam rishon. That's like the flavor going directly from the milk, I don't know, or from the, whatever, it's going directly from it's really tam sheni, but it's tam sheni of isser. It's going from the kli into the hot milk and forbidding the milk right away.
Right, the
And
fish was okay because
technically it is not bar nat, but it's not bar nat of an isser, because it's flavor from the meat to the bowl, and then from the bowl to the milk. And when it gets into the milk, it's secondary, but it's secondary in isser, and it has to be secondary in heter. So that's the first part. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Agreed?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now the second part of this Rashi is a little bit weird.
אבל קערה זו היא עצמה אינה בשר, אלא על ידי נותן טעם, ואינה כבשר. But the bowl itself is not, it's not itself meat, so the fish is not getting the basal from the tam
The
from the
problem with
meat.
this Rashi, I just to save time, I'm just gonna say what the problem is. The problem with this Rashi is we've already been assuming that he already said that we already know that the bowl is secondary. That's doesn't change anything of the picture that he described before. Before he described that if you put milk in it and into the bowl, so it would be direct contact with the flavor coming out of the bowl. But the bowl was, of course, only usher because it received tam. So then what does Rashi add by saying, but this bowl only is not meat? Well, we never were saying the bowl was meat. We're always assuming the bowl was secondary meat. So this Rashi makes no sense. So therefore, I sent you this tikkun, this correction, which basically says you've got to change the word kara here to the word fish. And then it reads correctly. So let me read it to you. It says, Aval hadagim. Let me read it to you my way. I'm not gonna read exactly the correction that I sent, but the same idea. Aval dagim ha'elu hen atzman einam basar. The fish that you put into the bowl, they aren't meat. Ela al yedei noten tam. They only got it because of the bowl giving it to them. So then they're not meat, and therefore you can eat them with kutach, and therefore you can eat those fish with kutach.
Particularly needed because of what he just said, which was that the ke'ara is noten tam rishon have a kibasar gamur, and now he's saying that the ke'ara is not. So it's the dag that's not. Yeah,
exactly. It makes no sense. He contradicts himself. Rashi makes no sense. Basically just telling us the din, which we sort of figured out from all of our learning, which is that that this fish is secondary. So now it's not like you're eating meat you're eating something that absorbs flavor of meat. So that's what we can allow. But if there would be actual meat in the fish, if the fish had touched actual meat, and you couldn't eat it that would be like one noten tam. But this is two noten tams, and it's still heter. So here's where we get this idea of noten tam bar noten tam, where it's still heter. And now if you go on to read the rest of the Gemara, what is shocking about the rest of the Gemara? I don't think we have time to read it, but what is unusual about the rest of the Gemara? Like it says, that's the next line. He says, Lav perush itmar ela michlala itmar. What does that mean?
Didn't actually say it explicitly. They got it out from the cloud of.
Specifically, Rav didn't say it explicitly, which also seems to be one of the factors. I think in arriving at paskening like Shmuel, right? Which obviously the reason we later pasken like Shmuel is because Chizkiah, we have a hilchata, but like it also is an influential factor, even though we generally pasken like Rav in Yisurim, right? The fact that we have an explicit statement seemingly from Shmuel and Rav, we have to kind of scope around to try and find where he explicitly stated this principle.
What is this? Actually, let's read a little bit more of the Gemara. Read the Gemara a little bit more.
Me?
Yeah.
Sure. From
what I just said.
והד רב, לאו בפירוש יתמר, אלא מכלל היתמר. Rav didn't say this explicitly, but we learned it from something else Rav said. דרב איקלה לוי רב שימי בר חייא בר ברי חש בעיניו. Oh, wait. So right, דרב איקלה לוי. Oh. It was right. Shimi Bar Chia came to Rav's house and
his grandson's house.
His grandson's house. Avdule Shaifa Betzea.
What is Chashle Be'enav? What does that mean?
I forget. What was it?
His eyes are hurting him.
Oh, right. His eyes were hurting him. Avdule Shaifa Betzea. So they made for him they made something for his eyes, and that was like based on
medicine.
Meat, I think. It was medicine, but it was meat.
They made medicine for his eyes,
right?
In a pot. In a pot. They boiled up some antibiotics in a pot, and now what?
Bishula begava Ta'im leitama deshaifa. Oh, right. After this, they cooked something else in that same pot, and he could taste the taste of this medicine.
And what did he say?
Amar yehiv tama kulehai. He said, like, wow, it gives flavor so strongly.
Right. So how do we learn from that? In
So
other
we're
words,
learning
so it
from
gives
this that,
flavor.
like-
I don't understand the question. So it seems like we're saying, you see that you still taste the shaifa, you still taste this medicine, even though I cooked some rice now in the pot. In other words, they made this antibiotics in the pot. Then they emptied it out and they cooked some, sweet potatoes. I'm being very anachronistic because they didn't have neither sweet potatoes nor
Rice.
antibiotics, but they cooked the sweet potatoes in it. And he says, wow, I can taste the antibiotics in these sweet potatoes. So that proves that he holds that there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat because he should not taste it because it shouldn't be there. But I don't understand. What is this story? This story makes no sense because we have a story in the Torah which says Play Midian. It says that when you cook food in a pot of Isser, you taste the Isser. I mean, the whole idea of not using a pot that's forbidden is because flavor goes from the pot to the food and you taste it, and tasting it Isser is forbidden. So it's not like Rav holds this opinion that the flavor is detectable when you boil something in a pot of a treif thing or of a shaifa of a medicine. Everybody holds that. So everybody holds it. That's the halacha. That's like everybody knows that a pot gives flavor. So what is this story telling us that he doesn't hold and that he's different from everybody else? He's just like everybody else. Everybody holds that. That story is meaningless. What kind of proof is this?
You could claim that this is a case of heter, like both of these things are heter. That makes the difference.
Oh, so this is very interesting. So what you're saying is like this. You're saying that we might hold that you cook Isser, everybody knows that you tasted Isser. It's kind of like a Brita filter. A Brita filter, you pour in it water. The water goes through, but the chemicals don't go through. So we thought a pot is like a Brita filter. You put in it treif, and the treif goes through into the food that you cook later. But you put in a kosher, it gets trapped in the walls. There's some kind of weird physics going on here. That treif of things go through the Brita filter, but kosher things get stuck in the walls. That's what you're saying. That's kind of crazy.
I don't think it's the same. Like it's also about the taste of what you taste in it, or what you might possibly taste in it. Like if you possibly might taste in it, heter.
But if
I think the whole point here,
but everybody holds you possibly might taste the Isser, and here you possibly might taste the heter. So
well, no, the argument
Isser
is that like seemingly it
function
is part of what is weird about this Gemara and this bringing is that like it's suggesting that the reason Rav would paskin this way is because we know from this other Maisa that he thinks that when things are placed in a bowl that is currently clean, that has had something else prepared in it before, that you are then meaningfully able to taste that previous thing in whatever is now placed in it, right? That like
that's the Gemara.
that it's about like a Lamaisa question of like, is the flavor really noticeable? And we're like, we know that Rav in this instance,
Well, we know those flavors are noticeable.
really
That's what
tasted the
Klei
eye
Midian
cream.
says.
Well, isn't
in
Klei Midian
food.
Klei Rishon?
Right.
Yeah,
This isn't a
what do you
case,
mean?
again,
What?
at least the one that Rav is dealing with, it seems to not be a case of being cooked in it, but that's like
Right.
also we'll
Right.
getting into our other questions, right? But like, again, what the Gemara itself answers is like, okay, maybe that's different. Maybe, yeah, like eye cream is particularly pungent in a way that like other things might not be.
I know, but I'm just still, it
Like-
doesn't answer my question. My question is, wouldn't everybody say that flavor of a shaifa goes through? And so what
Well,
kind of proof is this? It's not like Rav is saying anything unusual.
I
Apparently
mean, the
not.
How does it
suggestion
prove
would have to be that
anything
Shmuel would disagree.
different about Rav? I mean,
Maybe
in the end, the Gemara is going to say, that Rav does hold that there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat. By the way, we didn't explain exactly what that means. According to Rav, let's just clarify this point, another point, which is that he holds there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat. There is no Nat Bar Nat. He holds, I don't care how many levels of flavor, there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat. Shmuel says, no, there is such thing as Nat Bar Nat. And therefore, this is mutter. And Rav says, no, there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat. It's flavor. Is it flavor or is it not flavor? That's the only question. Do I taste it or do I not taste it? I taste it, it's us. That's Rav's simple idea. And that's what Rav consistently holds that in a later Maisa after this one, the Gemara brings that he in fact does not eat kutach with these fish. But that's for sure what Rav holds. Wait, but Joel, you're eagerly.
Well,
asking
I think the words kule hai is like the key here, right? Is maybe that's what Yavni was going to Lexi, right? Is that
Yes.
It's not that everyone knows you get flavor from a pot, but they assume that as each level the flavor weakens. That's what the basis of Shmuel is.
Exactly. That is the right way to learn the Gemara. Exactly. That is the point. That the words are kule hai. In other words, obviously there's flavor. So, but when Rav says it's kule hai, what he means is it's not tam kalush. That's exactly our topic. Tam kalush. Nat Bar Nat does not create tam kalush. We can learn clay median as being usher, but it's tam kalush. It's tam kalush, but tam kalush is usher by isurim. And the question is tam kalush usher by heter? Does it create a new heter? And here we see this is a heter. This is shaifa, which is a heter, and it's theoretically should be tam kalush. And he says, kule hai. Everybody knows his flavor, but I didn't know it's so much flavor. So that's our indication that he holds that there's no. And in fact, Rav does hold that like the other stories later on. But as we said, as Lexi pointed out, we say hilchata. It's hilchata. We hold that like Shmuel, that the kula, that Nat Bar Nat is not going to create a isser, and therefore you can eat with kutach. Lexi, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think again, an interesting sort of tension in this Gemara is that we see often the Gemara would prefer to explain things as not being debates about like physical reality, because that's a much more boring debate, is like, oh, there's actually no principles they disagree on. They just disagree about like how the world works, right? So like if this was actually the Michlala, right, we seem to reject that this is the Michlala of Rav, because right, we point out, we're like, again, maybe the eye cream is different and is more pungent. That doesn't actually necessarily imply what Rav would think about like a meat.
Yeah, I'm deep in the Havamina of the Gemara here.
Right. So like,
but in the end, it does hold that
again,
we do not
the
reject
Gemara
the
does not
opinion.
seem to reject. The Gemara does not seem to reject the idea that Rav paskins the way he paskins at the beginning, but like we're left without that seemingly being the support. And so it does seem like we start off with the assumption of like bringing this story would seem to imply that actually part of their disagreement has to do with the physical, like the Rav thinks it's like a kule hai, like really actually it's going to have a really significant physical presence, and Shmuel doesn't. And if we reject this, then we end up with the answer that's like presumably more satisfying to the Gemara of like, no, they actually agree that with like non-medicinal stuff, you're going to end up with not such a strong flavor. It's just that like they disagree as to what we're going to call that flavor, right? That Shmuel's going to say, yes, there's some little bit that gets imparted, but that's so little that in the case of it being hetera, we just don't care anymore, right? We just don't consider that to like make this have a basari status sufficiently that you can't eat it with dairy. And Rav is like, no, I agree with you about the amount of flavor there is there. I just think that is sufficient to call it basari, such that I can't eat it with milk.
All right, I want thank you very much. That's very, very good clarification. I want to go on. Sarah, can you read the Hilchata in the Tosfot?
Sure. I was looking ahead to the other, or looking back to the other Tosfot you gave us to see if it gave an answer to the Clay Median thing, but it doesn't really. Anyway.
Oh, you mean Kuf? In Daf Kuf you're talking about?
Kuf, yeah.
No, that's going to come up in Sif in the later Sifim. That comes up with the Shach brings that. That's why I brought that. Which is an interesting proof, and there's a Rabbi Akiva Eger on that also, which Alan knows.
Hilchada dagim shalu b'kara, shel basar mutar le'achlan b'kutach, im ha'kara v'adagim tzonenin. Lo itzarich lifsok, delekaman de'iflig, ela keshachad mehen roteach, debein ala agvar, bein tatagvar, klipa mihabaya, kid amre b'per ketzad solin, adamaker lebala. So basically, this is sort of going over something we've already said, which is that it has to be talking about something where either the kara or the fish are warm, because everyone would agree that if it were all cold, there would be no problem. Okay. B'shem Rashi Piresh Ravin Chodno Davka Alu Sharu Aval Nit Bashlu Asur.
Okay, so this is here. This is very important. B'shem Rashi, because we're going to see there's a difference between Rashi and B'shem Rashi. So Rivan, this is the din of Rivan, who holds that he knows what his grandfather believes, or his his father-in-law. So B'Shem Rashi Perish Rivan, no, his son-in-law. Davka Alu Sharu Aval Nitbashlu Lo. So he's medayik in the Gemara. What, Sarah?
He's saying that alu must mean some kind of, like, I don't know, it's like on a frying pan or something, and it can't be that you mamish cooked it, or you put it in a bowl. But you can't be cooking. You can't be boiling it.
Wait. Is he talking about the way, Sarah, in which the fish got hot, or is he talking about the interaction?
No, he's talking about what's happening
kara?
when the fish is in the kara, and like what. Yeah.
So in other words, what is happening when the fish is in the kara? It's a cold.
It's a
kara?
cold kara, hot fish.
Right, but if the kara was full of,
if it was like a boiling pot kli rishon with
right,
meat, that
I
would
mean,
be,
I think it's going to be helpful for us to think of karot as somehow things that can go either on the flame or on the table. Like you kind of in Israel, sometimes they serve like and also in other, actually in Bulgaria also they serve like eggs in tomato sauce in a dish on the table and also on the fire. So that's what a kara is, like a clay pot that you. So he says like this. He says dafka alu, right? Dafka alu sharu, if they were just placed on a cold plate, aval nitbashlu. But if you cook them in that plate and the plate was basari, then what? The kechad taimachashi. What does that mean?
I read it as like, then it's as if they become one flavor, right? So it's not that
As
there's
opposed to what?
As opposed to there's like a little bit of meat stuff that may have been exuded, right? So it becomes like melded.
Anybody else have another suggestion? Yavni.
I like that. The way I thought it was confusing to me. The way I thought it made to make sense of it was like one nitinat tam. It's considered.
Yeah, one step.
Exactly.
One
It's kechad tama means it's not tam kalush. It's not Nat Bar Nat. Basically, it's not Nat Bar Nat. It is, even though we would think of it as Nat Bar Nat, it's not considered Nat Bar Nat. We would think of it because actually the meat went into the pot and then from the pot into the fish. But because it's boiling, it's considered as it's one level, and it's as though you cooked it with the meat. So in other words, it's not Bar Nat. It's considered. Uba maise.
ובה מעשה לפניו וביצים שנתבשלו בקדרה של חלב, ואסור לעשות מהם מוליאתה של בשר. So there's this case where you cook some eggs were cooked in a milchik pot, and then it's asur to make, I don't know what a moliata is, but it's some kind of bisari dish.
You can't use the eggs with meat. So in other words, we're seeing that the chumrah of the rivan is that there's no such thing as Nat Bar Nat when you have boiled it in a meat pot. And that's going to be not the spoiler alert, that's going to be basically the halacha. We're going to see a certain kula of the rosh, but that's going to be an sefer truma. But more or less, I would say we basically are going with the rivan, and it's the medayik in the Gemara. The Gemara, we're only going to.
We as Ashkenazim, we're very much.
When I say we, yes,
really don't go like the rivan.
Sorry, I meant to say correction accepted. Yes, I meant when I say we, I meant we who are born of families that were from Northern Europe. But those who are not born from there, then yeah. Okay.
So that's
or who've chosen to adopt Sephardic customs. Rav Avadia says anybody can become Sephardi. Yeah, Alish.
I just wonder, so the master, to whom did it happen? Did it happen to Rashi? Does he claim that?
Great question. I looked at great question. It's obviously not Rashi. It's not Rashi. It's got to be the Rivan. Because if it would be Rashi, then we know machloket about what Rashi thinks. And we're about to see a machloket about what Rashi thinks. It's the Rivan. The Rivan said, I'm so sure that I know what my father-in-law meant that I'm going to paskin like that. And I'm going to forbid it. Of course, you don't have to be so sure to forbid things. That doesn't prove much. All right, go ahead. V'yesh. Lavi raya.
ויש להביא ראיה לדבריו מצנון שחותכו בסכין דאסור לאכלו בכותח, משום דאגב חורפי בעלת פה וחשיב כחד תמה. So we can get some evidence for this position from case of like cutting a radish with a bisari
Right, which
knife.
is the next piece of the Gemara, which says you can't eat it with a kutach, even though the knife has only got a tom from meat. And
Right.
then the meat went through the knife and then into the radish, and now you can't eat the radish with the kutach. So you see there is a time in which Nat Bar Nat does not apply. So also maybe in boiling. But now he's going to reject this though. Vinit Bashlu. Well, he's in the first.
V'nit baslu lo gara bitznon. So maybe
Right.
meat who lefer
No,
leferush
Vinit
lashon.
Bashlu is no. It should not be any more lenient than snow. What if Bishtash? That's totally hot. You tell me snow is hot.
Right,
but
that's
cooking
like
is
really
hotter.
hot. This is
Right.
but then he is gonna reject that. V'mihu leferish lashon acher shepirish b'kuntrus detama de asur mishum shahashuman karush ala sakin ve'enu nikar v'have tam rishon bitznon. So maybe actually this radish case is slightly different because the real reason, at least according to Rashi's interpretation, the real like concern that we have is that there's like some sort of residue on the knife that is particularly
Right. This goes back to
like
the
sticks to the
assumption.
knife and you wouldn't know
Right.
it.
We assume that knives are dirty. We're going to
We
see
assume the
this
knives
in
are
the-
dirty and right. So this is to do with knives and it's not to do with the harifut of the radish.
Exactly. Or not only the harifut of the radish, but it's exactly.
Okay.
Umitoch lashon hakuntris.
Umitoch lashon hakuntris mashma de'ein chiluk bein alu v'nit bashlu. And so it also we can imply from Rashi's language that he's not making some distinction between just putting them in the container and actually cooking them in it. Dila'el gabe notin tam bar notin tam perish bekuntros de'im have mivushalim im basar mamash lo la'achol chalav be'kara mo de shmuel de asur de have notin tam rishon mashma mitoch perusho shem mevushalim im basar hu de asur aval mevushalim im hakara share. Right.
In other words, if you, I would even say mevushalim hadagim, aval dagim mevushalim im or whatever mevushalim im hakara. If you boiled fish in the kara, that would be fine. The only thing that's forbidden is boiling the fish with actual meat. So from Rashi, so from the fact that Rashi took an extreme case to say it's mutter, to say that's the only thing that's usher. The only thing that's usher is if you cooked it with meat. So mashma, cooking it with the pot, if you cooked it in the pot of meat,
cooking it in the meat pot would be fine.
So far we're coming out, we're going to see, I mean, the Rambam also is going to hold like Rashi. So basically, just so far what we've got is that the Rivan is saying you got to be machmir by bishul, and Rashi and the Rambam are going to both say, no, you don't have to be any more machmir by bishul than you do by klisheni. Yeah? Yavni, you want to say something? No, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say seems like sort of a typical problem in understanding like Ashi or others that like he defined things such that we got both extreme cases from him but didn't get the middle.
And we left it the middle, exactly, because the other part of, because that's part of Rashi, but Rashi also said, said in the second part of the Rashi, he says,
Dagim sha'alu b'ke'ara min hatzeli kshayu rotchin, right? That's how he defined. Right.
Right, there he defined, because, so the answer I would say is that case, he was just describing the case. That was the case. The case in the Gemara is just that. But when he actually defines where the difference lies, it's like Tosfot says. All right, go on in the Tosfot.
Okay.
Don't worry, you're not going to read it all. You're not going to read it all, but most of it. Go ahead.
Sorry, you cut out for a second. Can you say that again?
Oh, never mind. Just continue.
Okay. Ve'im tash kol hapat asura achi sokat tanor velo sagi bekinuach ein raya misham denit bashel asur delo chashiv le bekinuach notain tam bar notain tam. So okay, so then we're gonna bring this case that we saw a couple of weeks ago about the like you shouldn't coat the sides of an oven with tail fat. And if you do, then all the bread is aser because it's fleischig. And you could, it's not sufficient just to like clean off the sides of the oven. So don't go thinking that case would convince you that that bishul is that cooking.
That should be a case of Nat Bar Nat. The
That should
fat
be Nat Bar
into the
Nat,
wall, and
right.
the wall into the fat into the wall, and the wall back into the bread.
Wall into
So
the
it should be
bread.
Nat Bar Nat. And why did we say it's us
But it's
there?
not.
Oh, maybe Rivan is right. So he says answers Rabbeinu Tam.
Okay. Domer Rabbeinu Tam de'ef shar letanur hitkaneach yafa. But Rabbeinu Tam says about that case that it's just not possible to clean it sufficiently.
So it's actually
that's
mamashut
basically
the fat in the bread. So it's not a proof.
yeah.
Which was sort of
Okay.
the
This is
same thing we
basically-
did with the knife, right? Sorry.
Yeah, it's basically
Exactly,
the
it's the
same
same
maneuver that we did
theories.
with the knife and the radish. Right?
All right, so
It's
now
just the
skip
same
down,
Like this
skip-
case doesn't apply. You might have
So now
thought that it's or not an asur, but actually no, it's not what you thought it is. Okay, so right, so Deomer Rabbeinu Tam de'ef shar letanur litkaneach yafesh kishenidbak bo hasham nuni.
All right, so we'll stop there. We'll stop there. We'll stop there with Tosfot. So I want to. The truth is that at the end of the Tosfot is relevant for the later Seif, but which maybe we'll get to. Let's go to the tour. Let's go to the tour. I mean, as usual, there's a lot to do here, so I'm just pushing you fast. But that's the basic. We got the basic opinions there. I would say that we're about to see the Sefer Truma, which is going to be a very important opinion for Ashkenazi. Here, Alice, you want to read the tour? Tzadi Hey. You're on silent.
דגים רותחים מיד לאחר שסלקן מן האש שנתנן בקערה צוננת של בשר, או שהדגים צוננים והקערה רותחת, מותר לאוכלם בחלב, אבל אם נתבשלו בגדרה של בשר, יש אוסרים לאוכלם בחלב. I'll translate here.
Who's that? Who's that? Who's Yeshua Stream?
The Rivan was there.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's Rivan.
Okay. So shall I translate that? No. Okay. So okay. Verashi matir afilu shenibashlu bagdeira shel basar. Okay. So he reads Rashi like the Tosfot that it's motar if it's boiled even with the gdeira shel basar, not basar mamash. Ela im ken nidbashlu im basar be'atzmo. Okay, that's what he said. ובעל התרומה מתיר כשנתבשלו, ואוסר בניצלו, שכיוון שניצלו באלו מים, קיבלו טעם בשר מעיקר הקרי, ואסור לאוכלם בחלב. So there's the Rashi.
So now we have this kind of intermediate position. That's the best way to think about it.
Which this intermediate position, which separates between nitzlu and nitbashlu, because in the bishul there is some mayim in between. There's
wait, you're adding that. You're adding that. But
okay.
Yes, okay.
I'm adding.
We didn't
that.
See that yet, but yes.
But that's how I understood it here. Also, that
so he's agreeing with. He's sort of basically. Well, what is he saying? He's saying.
Nobody says
I would say the way he just explained it, that he's adding that there's water there, is basically saying. I agree with. I agree that I mean, yeah, I agree that bishul maybe causes there to be no noten tam, but you're adding if there's water there, then what have we got? Then we've got 3 levels of noten tam bar noten tam. So then I will say lakula. I will say that then there's Nat Bar Nat. There's Nat Bar Nat when there's 3 levels, because there's fish, there's meat into the pot, and then meat flavor from the pot into the water, and then meat flavor from the water into the fish. So that I'll permit if you boiled fish. But if you cook the fish directly in the frying pan with no water, then it's just regular Nat Bar Nat, then that's Rivan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it like this, the case Rivan says you need to have what is Rivan's opinion? Rivan's opinion is it's only when it's in Kli Sheni. So it's like this. Rivan says you need kli sheni and Nat Bar Nat, because that's what it says in the Gemara. It says alu, which is kli sheni, and Nat Bar Nat. So basically, you need Nat Bar Nat plus something more. So the Sefer Truma says, I got something more. I got one more Nat. And that will make it permitted. That's sort of like the Gemara. Because the Gemara said, Nat Bar Nat and alu and kli sheni. So he's saying Nat Bar Nat and one more Nat, so then I'll allow. But sli, if I roast the fish in the pot, then I don't have that kula. Okay, go on.
ולזה הסכים אדוני אבי הראש ז"ל וכתב ירקות או דגים שנתבשלו בגדילה של בשר, מותר לאוכלם בחלב, רק שהייתה הגדילה רחוצה יפה, שלא היה שום שומן דבוק בה. אבל אם ניצלו בכלי של בשר, אסור לאוכלם בחלב. Okay, so that's...
What does the Rosh say?
Rosh's opinion, he talks about the case where the vegetables or fish were boiled in the basari pot, and so we can eat it with halav, but the pot must have been cleaned very well. So it looks like, right, it was ben yomo, but it was cleaned very well, right? Which means that there could be no shuma, no fat
Right.
on the walls of it or that.
But that's
But
exactly like Sefer Truma. I don't see any difference between that and Sefer Truma. In other words, that's just what he said. He is scheme. It was his scheme. In other words, that's the Sefer Truma. He's just saying a little bit more words. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
okay. וכן התיר הרמב"ם כשנתבשלה, שכתב קערה שאכלו בה בשר ובישלו בה דגים, מותר לאוכלם בחלב. דגים שתלויים עם הבשר, אסור לאוכלם עם החלב. Okay, so that's...
Oh, and there you see the Rambam says just very simple. You cooked it in a pot, it's mutter, like Rashi. Or like, and then he says, but then why does he say like that is not like Rashi? Sluim in basar, well, sluim in basar might be a more extreme case. That might be like, it's not the sluim in a pot that was basari, but it's mamish sluim in basar. So that would seem to imply that only that is asur. And therefore, sluim, not in basar, but just sluim on a tray that was fleshik, is also going to be mutter. And that's going to be the pashtus of Rashi. So that's why I said that Rashi and the Rambam both agree that any Nat Bar Nat is permitted, doesn't matter. The Rosh and the Sefer Truma say Bishul is different from Sli. Yeah, Yavni. I mean, you could read this Rambam differently, but you have to go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about the Rambam, the first part. It just seems odd that he says "K'ara she'achlu ba basar ubishlu ba dagim." It's like making it a alu on the other end of it, like that there was never, yeah.
Right, because I mean, the Gemara seems to be talking about it's unclear what a kara is. If a kara is a plate, then presumably you just ate on it. So why? Yeah, I agree with you. I noticed the same thing. In other words, how fleshik, the Rambam is sort of pointing out that the plate isn't very fleshik. It's only fleshik because you achlu bo. But maybe but it's got a klipa. Maybe you achlu bo cham. You poured hot fish, hot meat soup into it, and now it's got certainly a klipa. So
this is the other sources seem to be asking the question about like assuming that it was used to cook meat and then asking whether it was used to cook the fish or just eat the fish. And here we have like a switching where like it's not.
If the plate was never used for meat, only cold, then this din would not apply. I'm going to say I'm going to give you just a way to. I'm also sensitive to the exact question you're asking, and I was worried about it. But I think just for simplicity's sake, we have to say that achlu bo means hot, and therefore there's some
but we're making a distinction.
Some real fleshik in it.
At least some of us, right? Like the Rivan, at least, is making a distinction between eating hot and cooking in.
Yeah, but that's talking about the interaction of the fish.
Exactly, right. So I think it's interesting that the Rambam leaves us
This is talking about the interaction of the plate with the original meat, and that we have to assume is hot.
Sure, but like
even though the Rambam says achlu.
But like so but then the question is like, but does it make a difference that it was just eaten hot as opposed to cooked, like it does for the fish? And if not, like, why does he use different language? Why does he not, like, he
It's a good
just
question, but
3
I'm
words
not.
later is usually, yeah.
I did not see anybody. I did not really go into the Mefarshim of the Rambam, and I didn't see anybody who addresses it. So let's leave it. But it's a good question. It's a good question. I was sensitive to the same question. I'm just saying, for simplicity, for the sake of going forward, let's just say that the pot is fleshik in every sense of the term. But what he says is that it's also to do tzli in basar, and he doesn't say it's also to do tzli without basar. So that seems to imply that tzli is mutter, more makil than the rosh, I would say. Now you could say there's another way of reading the Rambam. You could say that no, he's exactly like the Rosh, because he says, but maybe he's exactly like the Rosh. And when he's saying im basar, that's just because that's the only way he can imagine tzli ever being an issue. Because if you would do tzli without meat there, then the skewer would be kashered by the fire, and what fleshik flavor would there be at all? Maybe you could say, but you know what I'm saying? So he's just saying that as a hechatimsa, as a way of creating a case where there's some real fleshik flavor there. Maybe it's not touching the meat, maybe it's just next to the meat. Anyway, asur lochlam bechalab. Ve'eni mevin, so read on, yeah?
ואני מבין למה כתב שצלויים עם הבשר אסור לאוכלם בחלב, והוא הדינמי מבושלין עמו. שהרי לא התיר אלא כשנתבשל בקערה של בשר. ואם בא להחמיר בצלי, אם כן, למה כתב עם הבשר אפילו בלא בשר, עם הבשר, אפילו בלא בשר נמי בכלי של בשר אסור.
Right. So I tried to answer that question. I tried to answer. My answer can't be very good because the Torah didn't think of it, and if it would be a good answer, then the Torah would have thought of it. But my answer is that because the Rambam, there to be a case of tzli that could possibly be a shaila unless there's actual meat there. Because in other words, because the fire would burn up whatever in the pot. I mean, if it's tzli over the eish. If it's like, and maybe the Rambam doesn't think tzli in an oven is tzli, because anytime you put it in a pot, there's going to be some liquids there. So whatever, I have a teretz. I have a way of thinking about it, but it's not really that important. Let's go to the Yosef. The Rambam maybe it's not clear what the Rambam is exactly saying, what is asur, but I think he's saying that that tzli, if theoretically there would be no basar there, would be also mutter. Okay. So who didn't read? Jacob, why don't you read the beginning of Beit Yosef?
Yeah. Okay. Dagim rodchin miyad lachar salkan min ha'esh natan bekara b'chulei. This kind of the Gemara b'parak dagim
Kol basar.
kol basar.
Basar.
Dagim she'alu bekara shel basar mutar lachlan b'chutach mishum dehave notin tam bar notin tam habasar bekara v'kara b'dagim. Ve'ika train tinat tam kodam sheyavo l'chlal isor. V'chat vuhu hatosva baras dagim sha'alu. Heru sha'alu minatzli otsamnim bekara rod achat mitochlos od Rashi masma de'in chiluk bin alu linit baslu. Riban.
Right.
Okay.
Continue.
So, Riban chad no
Yeah.
katav. This mo alu in nit baslu lo. Ve'afagav diba alu nami kibuk de ipat tamina basar. The blia muatat hatiru not notin tamar not notin tam. Val nit baslu v'nivla kol tam habasar shaya but lo abek there asorlach lo bekutach.
So wait, so what? So now the Beit Yosef is explaining the Rivan. What is his explanation?
So if we're just saying that was like alu, it's that it does take in flavor. It does absorb flavor to the point of klipa, but when you get to when it's a case of nitbasu, I guess it's pulling out all the flavor that was absorbed into the pot and putting that into the, I guess, the fish because of the
So
hop.
why is Nat Bar Nat applicable only? In other words, it's only applicable. It's only a kula for us when when the plate is cold.
Because the level that like it is secondary, the amount of flavor that's being pulled out. It's like I guess we're saying there is transfer of flavor, but it's almost the thing itself that's being transferred with bishul. It's if it's cold, it's not. It is a secondary lower level. So
Well, to put it in terms of quantity and quality.
Okay.
I mean, I think that they're both questions of quantity and quality. There's what do you need to have it to be usher? Or what do you need to have to be mutter?
Oh, well, there's shishim, so it needs to be if it.
No, I mean, no. All right, sorry, maybe I'm confusing you by saying too many things. What I mean to say is like this. I mean to say is that if there's a small quantity, only klipa. That's a small quality. When is there only klipa?
When it's cold.
When it's cold, then there's only klipa. Then noten tam bar noten tam comes to our rescue. But when the quantity, then the quality, in other words, then the quality of the flavor comes into the fact that the quality of the flavor is noten tam bar noten tam, is kalush, and the quantity is small, then will be mekel. But when it's noten tam bar noten tam, so it's kalush quality, the quality is low, but it's bishul, and in bishul there's not just a klipa, but the whole thing. There's a lot of quantity.
Okay.
Then we're not going. Then the quantity sort of, right? Somebody once said a quantity is itself a quality. If you have enough quantity, then the quality it takes over for the quality.
Yeah.
Stalin said that.
Stalin, yeah, there you go. Not one of my heroes.
Yeah, Paskin like it.
Joel.
We've seen that similar idea, right, in Noten Tam Lifkam before, right? The idea that if it's pagum, but it increases the size such that it makes it better, right, in terms of size.
Oh, very interesting connection. Very interesting connection, yeah. I mean, it's a bit different, but a very interesting connection, yeah. So anyway, the point of Rivan is that the quantity is so small, then the kalush is like, comes in and finishes off the job and makes it nothing. But kalush can't do that job. Okay, the katav harosh. Continue, Jacob.
The Ktav Harosh Od, it was Sefer Had. I'm not sure which Sefer
As
it
he's
is.
quoting the Sefer Truma.
Oh, Sefer Turmot. Hitir Rakot Vikitnit Nit Basel Victera Bat Yoma Cholavat Rakshate Nikia Mechalav Ochlan Bitav Shil Shel Basar. Vafilu Im Namar Alu Initzlu Lo Kishin Basel.
Like Rivan.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Kishinet Basu Sari Mishum Ika Gimel Netam Hakala Baktera B'Mayim B'Yara. Lodenu Heter.
Rodono heter. So he's saying like this: the reason why we're makil by bishul of Yerakot is because there's 3 levels of netinatam, and it's odenu heter, and it still hasn't yet encountered any halav or any opposite type. Okay, we go on.
Gam Bidavar
Gim gem means he doubted. He second guessed himself. The gim gem.
Gim Bidavar Shesh Luchus Lufis Erak Vekitnit Nogim Bekdera uvolim bin hakdera atzma.
So what's his wait? So what's his second guessing of himself?
Well, there's a level that's just like absorbing from like the water where there's this distance, but if these things in the pot rub against the wall of the pot, they'd absorb directly from it.
Okay. So then how we don't have a third level.
Right.
Go ahead.
So Bapa became Hikriela Ter de Kaman Ika Maim de Kui Robatam mit Paset Bim I am. The Gamiark no Bola Midofnek Dera Ella Ide Retikat Hamayim. The same is
Okay, wait a second. So now he said 2 reasons to go back the other way. 2 reasons to go back to his original psak. What are the 2 reasons? To be lenient. Now, to be lenient by water in the pot.
So most of the flavor is going to be, pulled out of the wall into the water.
Right. In other words, and what do we presume about the water? What do you do with the water? Do you drink it?
No, you're going to get rid of it.
In other words, right. Most of the flavor is going to be thrown away. So there's only a little bit of flavor that's getting into this vegetable that we care about. And what's the second reason?
Even rubbing against it's the vegetables not really absorbing from the well, it's absorbing through the water.
Well, wait, that doesn't say absorb. Wait, read that again. Read that again.
It's only absorbing through like the heat of the water.
Or by means of the heat, the boiling of the water, right? It's the water,
because of the heat of the way I read it like this, because of the heat of the water. If there wouldn't be the heat of the water there, that's how the heat is conveyed through the water. So you can't ignore the water because the water is sort of the cause of the whole process. So don't ignore the water. I think that's what he's saying. It's sort of a philosophical point almost. All right, so therefore he sort of goes back to saying the water is going to help. The Ken.
Ikatam Gimel Visari Aval Natslu Asor Adkam Lishonel.
Okay, so here is actually a very, very important principle, which is like this: that even though we're saying that, let's say if we're Ashkenazim, we're holding like the Rivan, and we only allow Nat Bar Nat in Kli Sheni to be a heter, but when there's a third level of Nat Bar Nat by water for a variety of reasons, because the water absorbs some of it, then, or because it's in the third level, there's basically, those are the 2 main reasons. The water absorbs some of it, and it's a third level. So then we can be mekel on the fish. But why can't you drink the water? What would be the problem with drinking the water? Alan?
It's only 2 knots, right?
Exactly, because the water is only 2 knots. The only way you get the third knot is by using the water as the intermediary. If you drink the water, then you lost that.
You mean drinking the water with dairy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you could drink it, but not with the dairy. All right, you want to take a break here? Let's take a break here for 5 minutes, and we'll come back. Continue. Here, Alan, you want to read? I guess I'm going to skip this bit of basically the Beit Yosef just brings other people who say you could be mekel entirely in Sli and in Bishul, as far as Nat Bar Nat. So read the Indian halacha at the end of this section of the Beit Yosef.
Got it. L'inyan halacha kevan de Rambam verashba veran ve'ezri v'skeno ri ein mechalkin ben nitzlu v'nitbashlu dekol gavna shari v'gam divrei Rashi mashmaken ve'achin achtinu.
So therefore, he says he brings a whole slew of people who say there's no difference between nitzlu, bashlu, and alu. All of them are the same. Nat Bar Nat is a blanket active force, an active reason to be lenient. I just want to point out something that I would say like this. My favorite question to ask on these topics is this: why don't we just taste it? Why don't we just taste it? After all, it's fleshig. We could just taste it. It's not treif. Worst case, we're eating some meaty flavored fish. Why don't we just taste it? So you have to say that tasting doesn't help. You have to say that tasting is not going to help. Which means what? Which means, well, probably what it means is, I'll just go with one angle. Probably what it means is, even if I taste meat there, it's a tam kalush. We consider it a non-meat taste. In other words, even if I would taste that meat there, I would still be able to eat it with kudach habavli because it's kalush. That's called kalush taste. It's tasteable, but it's just kalush. The other, just for the sake of completeness, I'll say the other way to understand it. The other way is to say is, if it's not Nat Bar Nat, even if I don't taste it, it's aser, right? If it's only one nut or something like that, or according to Rivan, even if it's two nuts, but it's bishul, and I don't taste it, it's not going to be a heter there, right? According to Rivan, maybe it works both ways. The point is, tasting is not going to help, because even if you taste it, maybe it's still aser, and even if you don't taste, even if you do taste, maybe it's mutter, because maybe it's not Bar Nat. Even if you don't taste it, maybe it's still aser, and if you do taste it, maybe it's still mutter. So tasting is not going to help, but it's just an interesting point to think about. Now, Bedek Habayit. Al, you want to read the Bedek Habayit?
Yeah. כתב רבינו ירוחם, תבשיל שנתבשל בכתר הבשר, מותר לאכול גבינה אחריו, אפילו בלא קינוח. ואם אין בית יומא, מותר לאכול אותו תבשיל עם גבינה. עד כאן שם. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yerucham says if it was cooked in a meat dish, it's fine to eat dairy after it, even without washing it. And if it's not bad yoma, it's fine to eat the dish with meat, with dairy. ואין דבריו נכונים, אלא אפילו היא בת יומא, מותר לאכלה עם גבינה, תאווה נat bar nat, כמו שניבאר. Right. So actually, even if, according to the Bekabai, even if the dish was bad yoma, it's fine to eat with dairy because it's two levels of nat bar nat, like we just said.
So why? Wait a second. Why does he say it's not reasonable what he's saying? Why can't he just be saying like the Rivan? Well, why is he saying it's not reasonable?
Well, he thinks that the bat yoma and bat yoma distinction is not relevant here because if it was bat yoma,
because of the right? Why can't you say it's aser because he holds like Rivan? I think because
the next part is seems to be a contradiction. The next part that he quotes from Rabbeinu Yerucham.
Okay, so let's continue. But
exactly. I agree that it seems like he's just disagreeing with him, but not saying that. Yeah.
I have an answer, by the way, but you're going to see the answer. Right? Go ahead. You're a code. What is the Katav Od? Who's the Katav Od?
Rabbeinu Yerucham, I think. No?
Exactly. The Rabbeinu Yerucham continued and wrote. Go ahead. So wait a second. So he contradicts himself. He just said Tavshil is Aser. Don't answer the question, just understand the question. He just said Tavshil is Aser, and now he says the Zirakot is also Bishul, Nitbashel, and it's Mutter. So he seems to contradict himself. Mutter Lachlam Tavshil Shel Basar. Venira, go on.
Venira Davka B'diavad. Aval the Fafila ain't no Vashel B'kli Shachalab to Barsher Telachol in Basar.
Oh, that's his other chumrah that if we don't talk about it later, which we should, but at least now let's mention it here. There is this Rabbeinu Yerucham is saying he's saying another diuk in the Gemara. The Gemara says dagim sha'alu b'kara. That's lashon b'di'evid. The dagim that came onto a plate, but that doesn't say that you're allowed to put them on a plate to eat them with. So if you're, for example, if you want to make, eggs for Suda Shlishi, and Suda Shlishi is going to be milchik, you are not allowed to boil them up in a fleshik pan, even though they're eggs and it's parv, if you're intending to eat them in this milchik meal. Because why? And we'll give a simple explanation. Why should we let you do that? Use a milchik pot. Why should you use a fleshik pot? There's rice in the milchik pot. Empty out the rice in the milchik pot and clean it and make the eggs in the milchik pot. We're not going to give you a heter to use a fleshik pot to make this eggs in a milchik meal. But you don't have any other pots. You don't have a rice pot. You have nothing. So then we could let you. And then we're going to see that. We're going to see that if you or you've already seen that if you don't have any pots, that's the only pot you have, then you could. But l'chatchila, why should we let you? It's actually very reasonable. It sounds like a crazy din. Like, why shouldn't I be if it's mutter in the end? Because why should we let you use a fleshik pot if you have it? Well, what if you're going to use the eggs? What if you're planning? If you're hungry on Suda Sheni, you might also have an egg. And Suda Sheni is going to be fleshik. So now you're using the eggs for fleshiks and milchiks, so then we don't care. We're not going to make you use two pots, one for the milchik eggs and one for the fleshik eggs. You can still cook your eggs in one pot, but if you know you're going to eat them in a milchik meal, use a milchik pot. And that's this other din of Rabbeinu Yerucham. But we're still left with this question of why did Rabbeinu Yerucham say, tavshil, you can't eat it with kutach, but by beans you can. And I think the answer is obvious. Wait. What's the answer? No. Let's just go. But Ain. So now the Beit Yosef is still upset with him. But Ain. Go ahead, Alan.
And we're over name. Can't really.
So the Beit Yosef says no. You can use your fleshik pot to make milchik eggs, no problem. For eggs for a milchik meal. But Rabbeinu Yerucham is going to come back to be the Ashkenazi halacha. Okay.
It looks like it all talks about Ben Yomo, right? Like the kli, which is Ben Yomo.
Yeah, if it's Eino Ben Yomo, then the whole matter doesn't begin. Okay, so let me just give you. Anybody have a good answer? Anyone want to give an answer? Why did Rabbeinu Yerucham say by Tavshil one thing and by Yerakot a different thing?
Maybe there's some.
Alan, since you ready, your first tip.
Maybe there's an intuitive difference between just cooking raw ingredients, something that's it's less machmir. Okay, we're just making one small thing of a larger dish, as opposed to I made my whole I cooked a whole setup in a meat dish, and maybe I might be a little bit more.
Yeah, you're definitely right, but you need to give more of an explanation. Sarah, you want to give more of an explanation?
I was just wondering whether it seems like the Yerakot and Kitniot you cook in water, as opposed to the Tavshil, which could be like the whole thing might be watery.
That's what I think. That's what I think is going on, and that's I don't know. I mean, I don't know why we're smarter than the Beit Yosef, but I think that's exactly what's going on. He said that I helped you along because I said I'm emphasizing Tavshil versus Yerakot. Tavshil is curry, chicken curry or a cholent. You're making a cholent, then there's no Nat Bar Nat. I mean, there is Nat Bar Nat, but there's no 3 levels. There's no water. So I can just say Rabbeinu Yerucham holds like the Rosh and like Sefer Truma. Yavni.
It doesn't feel to me like the Beit Yosef is pointing out this contradiction. It feels to me like he's just disagreeing with the dean. It's a little odd, the phrasing that he, I don't know why he's saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
But okay, so then it's even worse. Then the Beit Yosef just doesn't understand that Rabbeinu Yerucham is paskening, not like he wants to pasken. Not like, you know what I mean? He's just paskening like the road.
Right, but I mean, I don't think he's saying it. I'm not sure that he's saying that it's like inconsistent internally or anything. I think he's just saying.
I understand what you're saying.
Right, like this is the Bedek Abayit, so someone else is pointing at him. Wait, where's this other opinion? So he has to come and say,
he says,
yeah, there's an opinion, and I don't agree with it.
Is a very strong language. You just say we don't pasken like him. But why does it say Ein Devarav Lo Nochim? Edav Rav Nechonim is a very strong thing. He's saying he's a
Yeah.
ta'ut. That's almost an internal ta'ut. Joe.
Hmm.
I wonder if the Beit Yosef or him when he's in the Bedek Abayit thinks there's a difference between using water as a heat source versus actually intending to have the things absorb the water as a cooking medium, which is what happens with, kitniot.
Is it?
And
Oh,
he's saying that's
kitniyot
yeah.
absorb the water? Not necessarily. Oh, I see what you're saying. Kitniyot, but it's Yerakot and kitniyot. When I think of kitniyot, I kept saying to myself, I combined Yerakot and kitniyot together, and I got string beans.
Fair enough. That's yeah.
But you're
I
saying
have
it's
to
dried
say-
beans.
Rabbi, I have to say that over a bowl of steaming hot chamusta this afternoon, I thought about the sugya. The vegetables in the chamusta were so much identified with the meat, as opposed to a cacophony of tastes that merge together in a chant. The vegetables are subject to the water-soaked vegetables, subject themselves and are pliant, and they become part of the dominant tom.
Well, I don't understand where you're going, because the cholent, the Rebbeinu Yerucham says that the cholent you can't eat with the kutach, but the vegetables you could eat with the kutach.
Yeah, so that's my question.
Yeah.
That was my problem.
Rav Lance is
Yeah,
like
well,
the
I
Beit
mean, your
Yosef.
case is much worse. You got actual meat there, so that's Rashi's case. That's Rashi when he says that's for sure you can't eat with cheese. I hope you didn't have hope you don't put what is it called? In Russia they make borscht with meat. I hope you don't put your sour cream in your Russian borscht. That could be, even if it's a cliche, it could be a problem. All right. Let's go on. Okay, I thought somebody said, I don't see it right away, but somebody said what I'm saying, and they said it in the way, they said like samich was the word they used. They said that if it's a samich food, then the Rivan would not say what he says about bishul being mutter. I thought it's the Beit Yosef actually, but I don't want to read all the Beit Yosef to find it, and I don't have it highlighted right now. So let's go on. I want to skip this next section and go to Alan. Go to Katav Smak.
Right.
I mean, not that the next section is not important. Everything's important, but
Okay, Katatsma, second column. Afilu nitzlu anita pashu damka b'diavad. Aval echafila aser lalatam olavashlam b'klisha baser k'tei leachlam b'kutach.
key word here. Which word should you emphasize here? In what you just read, which is which single word?
B'diavad. Aval echafila aser.
No, another word that I want you to that if you read my mind.
And the halatam olavashlam b'klisha baser.
One word.
And
Nitzlu?
Kedei, that's the word I want.
Right.
Kedei. In other words, if you're doing this kedei la'ochlam b'kutach, that's where the problem is, right? The smak is saying that even though maybe you have Nat Bar Nat, but dafka b'diavad aval lechatchila asur la'lotam kedei. In other words, what's the only lechatchila? If it's already nitbashlu, then you can eat it with kutach. That's not lechatchila. In other words, you might say that that's lechatchila. Why should I eat it with kutach? Go eat it with something else. No, but they already are cooked, so that's mutter. But you can't do this for the purpose. That's my example of the eggs for Seder Shlishi. So v'ken kasab. So here we have the smak as a source for this idea of not starting the whole process for the purpose of taking advantage of the law of Nat Bar Nat. So go on.
geen katav gam b'siman kutayiklet. B'diaklet that diamond the kamer dagim she'alu b'kara. Doshan diavad. Right, it says alu past tense.
As they somehow got there on the plate. You didn't put them on the plate. Go ahead. Kain Kasav Hagaos Maimonides.
Yeah.
You should know. Parak the two chapters in Rambam that are important, right? Parak Tet and Parak Tetvav. Tafvav. Tetvav.
Yeah, that's the Rambam we just saw. The same כתב גם כן רבינו ירוחם, אבל בעל תרומה כתב במתכות, דקטניות שבישל בקדרה חולבת, מותר לכתחילה לרתם בקדרה של בשר, ואפילו בקדרה בת יומא, כמו דגים של הבקרה. All right, so
so what does he say? What does the Sefer Truma say?
Seems the same, but the same way as the Bedek Abayit. It's fine l'chachila, even if the Kedar is Bayam.
Right. So look at bet in the Darkei Moshe.
It's Ben Yomer.
Yeah.
Ben Yomer, Kiniyem b'shachif, Amar lahem yilta.
What does that mean?
Right, he was asleep on the job when the Beit Yosef or the Baal Truma when he said this.
Right. Why? Go on.
The Beit Yosef, not the Baal Truma.
Right. The Beit Yosef. When the Beit Yosef said, "Aval," Sefer Truma says this. He was sleeping. Why?
The my Aval Baal Truma katav. What is the Beit Yosef saying when he says? But the Baal Truma wrote, "Sheharei gam hasmat lo amar ela delachachila aser latam bekara kedei leachlan im chalab. Aval im far ela pshita shemater lechachila achlan im chalab. Dehalo palik al gemara. De ketani demeter lechlan bechalab. Umeter lechachila mashma." Okay, just catch your breath there. Right.
So wait, what's his question? What's his question?
Right. So
the Smock said you can't start this whole process, right? Only if it's lashon b'diavad, alu. B'ken ketav hagam mamaniot, aval Baal Truma wrote the kitniot shebishlu b'kara cholevet. That's bishlu. It's also b'diavad. Bishlu. You already cooked them. Mutter l'chatchila la'arot b'kedera shel basar afilu ha'kedera. But so he didn't say anything different. He didn't say anything different from what the Smock said. It's only if it's bishlu. So why are you saying aval? Why are you contrasting these opinions? They're saying the same thing. Says the Darkei Moshe. They're both saying if it's bishlu or if it's alu, but not that you could do it l'chatchila. So why is he contrasting them? So I sent you in one of the sources the actual version of the Sefer Truma that he's being quoted here, and it's only a slight difference from what the Beit Yosef says. I'm not going to open it right now, but if you notice there, basically what it does is it moves around the word l'chatchila. And I don't even without that addition, it just makes it a little bit more clear. But even if you look, let's look carefully. I'm going to answer. What I'm doing now is I'm answering, defending the Beit Yosef against the Darkei Moshe. So what is my answer? My answer is, look what it says. It says, everyone got the question? Everyone got the question? Is the question clear? They seem to be saying the same thing. Why are you contrasting them? They both are saying you can't start the whole process, but if it happened, you can do it. Because that's not what the Baal Truma is saying. The Baal Truma is saying, you can start the whole process. You can start the whole process. Why? Because look what he says. He says, Kitniot shebishlu b'kedera cholevet. He should just say mutter la'arotan b'kedera. He should just say that if you did it, it's mutter la'arotan b'kedera. In fact, this is what he says. That is what he says. He says mutter la. The actual quote does not have the word l'chatchila there. It says mutter la'arotan b'kedera shel basar, and then he says afilu l'chatchila right there. So what do you mean afilu l'chatchila? You already said to me that you bishel them, and now you can pour them into the wrong kli, right? You can eat them with your kutach habavli. So why? So now what he's saying is, why is he adding afilu l'chatchila? He already told you that b'diavad, if you did it, you can now eat it with kutach habavli. So now you say, what more heter is he giving you there? I'll tell you what more heter he's giving you. That it's not only bishlu, it's a filu lechatchila. You can even start the whole process. Because he's adding, because of the extra lechatchila here. That's how the Beit Yosef is understanding him. Why did he add this extra lechatchila here? Even in the way it's written here, there's an extra lechatchila. Now, I want to say another point about this thing, because is it true that he's actually mattering you to eat, to do this whole process, and then eat it with a kutak habavli? Read the words again. Is he actually letting you eat it with a kutak habavli? No. Joel shakes his head. No. What is he allowing you, Joel?
Eat it in a meat pot if you cooked
Right.
it.
Oh, eat it in a meat pot. So now let's say like this. He's actually saying, he's not saying eat it with kutak habavli. He's just saying you can start the whole process if your only end goal is to eat it with your fleshik plates, your milchik plates. That you could do, but not eat it with kutak habavli. So it comes out like this. If it was already bashel in water, now you can eat, bidievid, now you can eat with kutak habavli. But if you want to start the whole process, you can't do that, eat with kutak habavli. But what can you do? This extra little kula, tiny little kula that nobody else is talking about. Only he's talking about it, therefore he's not contradicting anybody. Because it's his own little kula that he's saying, if all you're interested in is not eating a kutak habavli, but taking that fish out of the plate and putting it on a milchik plate to eat it with sardines and other parve foods, then I'll let you even cook it for that purpose. So we have like a little tiny kula here, which is distinguishing between kelim, and so we're getting a lot of little details here, right? We're getting one detail is that you can, if it's tam shlishi and you throw away the water, if it's not bar nat, and it's bishul, then we can be lenient, and we can also be lenient to let you do the whole process, but only if your only goal is to eat it on the wrong kind of plates, but not to eat it with kutak habavli. Okay. I mean, all these things that I'm saying here are actually going to appear in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's just skip ahead. I don't know if it's skip, but go to the Ran, Ketava Ran,
Okay.
and then we'll end the Beit Yosef and go to the Shulchan Aruch. Even though I'd love to read more.
Ketava Ran, Zelo Shari Nat Bar Nat, Ella Bishul Heter Kibasar B'Chalek. The Kevan de Tam Sheni Akati Hetera Kevan de Aklish Kulehai Lo Cheshiv Lemeser.
Here. So even before the Taz, which was Taz Aleph, I said Kalush, Thomas Kalush. Here you see Aklish. So what is the Ran? So let's translate this Ran again.
Right. So the only Nat Bar Nat only works for Heter, like Basar B'Chalek, not for.
This is a thing that you all should very much know. Remember that Nat Bar Nat does not work by Yisurim. One of the Nosei Kelim says, doesn't matter 100, doesn't matter how many levels is if it's time of. By the way, this is a proof. By the way, that we're talking about there is time that's discernible here. If there's time of treif, if there's time of chazir, if there's time of nevela, then it doesn't matter how many Nat Bar Nats you have, because it doesn't matter. It's kalush. Who cares that it's kalush? It's a tam. It's still a tam, and in that sense, Rav is right. It's a tam. It's a tam. It's a tam. It's a tam. So we're not going to be lenient. But when are we lenient? Only when we have a heter, and we're worried that this heter is going to bang against the opposite heter, milk and meat, and create a new isser called basar b'chalav. So to create that new isser of basar b'chalav, you have to have enriched uranium. You can't have uranium that's depleted. You put the depleted uranium together, and it's uranium. True, it is tam, but it's not strong enough to make a psatza. It's not strong enough to make basar b'chalav. If it's saturated, if it's fully saturated uranium, then it mixes together. If it's a real tam, then you can create the isser. Oh, yeah. Sorry for using strange metaphors. But... Okay. so the Ron says like that. So you agreed on. It came at the time. Well, I'll read. Because the lo shari Nat Bar Nat ela v'shel heter kebasar b'chalav. I could say kebasar v'chalav. I would prefer. The kevan the tam sheni akati heter. Since it's tam sheni and it's still in a heter state, but it's been depleted. Who kevan the iklush kulehai. Since it's so depleted, lo chashiv lemesa. It is not significant enough to create an isser. Lo chashiv lemesa. It's not chashuv enough to create an isser. Aval midi the isura, but something that is already an isser, like nevela. Kol heka the ikataima klal. As long as there is tam there, oser ad sof kol. Here's what I was referring to. It's oser ad sof kol olam. As long as there's tam. So again, back to that question, I said, why don't we just ask a kefela or a Jew to taste it? Just taste it yourself. The answer is, even though you taste it, it's still going to be mutter if it's not bar nat. And if there's no taste there, perhaps there's no question of not bar nat, because it's mutter. Perhaps. I mean, the Kain Katav Rashba B'tshuva. Okay. V'nira shadat kol poskim shavei lezeh. He says everybody agrees to this. There's no not bar nat in Isurim, just in Heterim, and the explanation is the Aklish Taimen. The Ken Kasav Leferush B'Shari Dura, V'lo Shari Dagim Sha'alu B'Kara La'ochlam B'Kutach El Mishum Da'ave Nat Bar Nat Dehetera Aval. It has to be a heter, even Aval B'Machvat O Yoreh Shel God Sheyesh Behen Noten Tam Shel Isser. But if there would be noten tam shel isser, by the way, he's very clear. What we're saying here is that we're always talking about that there's flavor here. I'm just repeating this point over and over again. That the whole din of Nat Bar Nat is where there is flavor. It's just that it's a kalush flavor. Because now he's saying the comparison is to a treifa case where it's a pot of a goy and there's flavor there, which is the comparable case, but it's Nat Bar Nat flavor, usser. V'nichnas tamo shel isser b'mayim. Asur l'chatchila, the mayim is asur lelush. Pot, the mayim. You can't use that to make bread. Shedish chamamu bahan. Afalgav the stam kelim shel goy yemeinam b'nei yoman. Even though probably their kli is not recently used. Mikol makom asur lelush pot b'chamin may b'batenu. Mayim min hamayim. We can't use their water in our house to make our bread. Shechamamu behen the ein lahatir noten tam lifgam, because even if you say it's noten tam lifgam, but fine, the water has got noten tam lifgam. It's got isser, but it's noten tam lifgam. In other words, it's got what's going into the water, tam lifgam, which is usser. But we have a gezeira. We don't allow. You're not allowed to consume tam lifgam. That's usser l'chatchila. That's what he says, right? The aim hatir noten tam lifgam l'chatchila, aval le'echol pat shel goy. So how can we eat the pot of a goy? He also used his water. He also heated up his water to. By the way, if you make bread, you should heat up your water. Cold water, the yeast won't rise. So you heat up the water a little bit, and why should we eat the goy's bread? He also used that same water. The avad. That's because by the time you're buying it in the store, it's already made. And that's called b'diavad, right? You can lechatchila buy it because it's already been made. And if you're asking me on the din of that bread, it's kosher bread. Ad kan Hashem. And then he says, "Oh, sorry, go ahead."
Yeah, someone had to call it b'diavad when you're lechatchila making a choice whether to.
Yeah, I'm emphasizing that point. Exactly. You have other bread, and so therefore you're not supposed to buy if there's, but if the goyish bread is better than the Jewish bread, you can buy it. Anyway, v'katuv b'hagaot the ein lahatir noten tam lifgam lechatchila. So you understand, you don't allow lechatchila means just because the water has been heated up, that's not called b'diavad. The water, you can say, the water's already been heated up. It's a very subtle difference, right? The water has already been heated up, but I can't use it to make my bread because why not? It's already, it's after the fact. You already heated it up. Because I haven't yet gotten any benefit from those waters. So there, if I was buying the water with tea, then it's already tea. And so then it's already ready to be consumed. It's the hana'ah is there. But this is still in the midst of the processing of making bread. And now, since you haven't yet created the hana'ah, it's still called lechatchila in the sense you should choose a better method. Don't choose this method. It's a very subtle point, right? It's a very small difference between these cases. Joel,
I don't know if I want to go. It's a whole question about whether or not then if you give hashgacha to pat palter, right? That makes it lechatchila. If you give pat, pat akum, if you give a hashgacha to it, that makes it lechatchila at that point because you're watching the process as it happens, and that makes it asur potentially, as opposed to if you let them, right?
No, well, what he's saying is that whenever the hana'ah is ready to be consumed, if that's the point that you're at, then it's called the b'diavad. Then you're allowed to eat it. But if you're in the stages going ahead, so the bread, you're giving a hechsher to the bread, but now it's bread. So what's the problem?
Because you're giving the hechsher while it's still, when it's still lechatchila. That's the issue going on there.
If the goy asks you, "Can I use this water to make the bread?" Right, you should probably tell him no. And that's exactly you've actually answered a very interesting. You've answered a kasha that we've always had. Why is the OU so strict? Why do they make the factories do all this stuff? It's all b'diavad. When we buy it in the store, it'll all be mutter. Because they got involved. Once they're involved, they have to say the process has to be kosher. That's what we see here. Once you're involved in the process, once they ask you, which water should I use? You can't, then you're involved. Then you have to tell them what to use. But if you would ask me, if it's just like the factory is in China and I have no chance of getting there, there's no planes to China, and it just comes on the boat to my house, to my supermarket. What's mutter? So that's what the Dutch people do. The Dutch people have a list of what's kosher and what's not kosher. So they're not involved. They're just telling you what is b'diavad now kosher and lachatchila mutari. But if you're actually on the premises, then you have to. Then it's not called b'diavad anymore, right? It's a chab. It's a big chab. It's a big. In other words, that's a transformational idea that sort of defends those who would say why
you have to give us a definition of b'diavad based on that.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say the word b'diavad, but let's say it's
no, that's good
so
word.
b'diavad is when, b'diavad in the sense that it's mutter to eat it now. That's what you mean by b'diavad.
Yeah, you're right.
B'diavad means that the item is in a state where the human enjoyment of it is there, that it was intended for, is there ready for in the asking.
It's already in play.
Prepared.
So
it's already the human benefit that was intended for the production of this thing has already been achieved. You're finished. It's sort of like we have by maaser. It's sof malachtan. Right? By maaser, you only take maaser at sof malachtan, right? That's why in the field you don't have to take maaser, but when it's been gathered together, and it's and whatever the sof malacha is, then in other words, whatever the sof, it's a little bit. I'm stretching the idea, but whatever is like the makeba patish, maybe that's a better metaphor. Whatever is the thing that makes it ready now to be consumed, where that's what I was saying, by the tea, by the water, by the water. If you wanted to drink the water, then it would have been awesome. That's what he said. But since you don't want to drink the water, it's just part of the process of making bread. So again, if it's ready to be consumed, that's called b'diavad. If it's not ready to be consumed, then it's not. So what about something what about vinegar? That's an interesting question. Nobody consumes vinegar. But still, they do. The hana'ah, that's called the hana'ah ready. Okay, let's go to Shulchan Aruch in the time that we have remaining. I think, Joel, you'll have a lot of work in the Chazara here to go through all of the stuff that we did not do because, I mean, jeepers, there's so, you know what? Since Joel's going to do it anyway, of course, I'm going to skip right ahead. Well, all right, I don't know if I can skip. I'm thinking of skipping to Sif Gimel. in the wrong Siman. Yeah. No, let's just do what we're supposed to do for Sifim, and we'll leave to another time. All right, Dagim shenitbashlu o shenitzlu b'kadeira shel basar l'kitsa. Yafe she'ein shum shuman davuk ba mutar lochlam bekutach mishum da'ave not notentam or notentam de'tera ve'im lo hayta rechutza yafe im yesh b'mamash im yesh b'mamash she'al hakadera yoter me'echad b'shishim b'dagim asur lochlam bekutach. So if there's real taste, right, you can't eat it with kutach. The Rabbanan, right? Only the Rabbanan you can't eat it because the right is not cooking it. But you can't eat it with kutach if it has real taste. But if it has this bishul taste, and he says, notice he says bishlu and nitzlu. He's posketing like Rambam and Rashi. No difference between kli sheni and kli and mamish bishul. Bet. Beitza shenitbashel b'mayim b'kedeira cholevet mutar l'teit otah l'tov tarnegolet afilu l'chatchila. If you already bisheled it, it's mutar l'chatchila now to put it in chicken, but you can't cook it for that purpose. Oval im nitbashel b'kedeira im basar, like Rashi, if it was actually im basar afilu b'klipa asur l'chal b'kutach. You don't think that the klipa is going to be a mavdil? It's going to separate you from the fleshikness. Okay. V'yesh machmirim b'tzli. So here the Rama. Yesh machmirim b'tzliya ubishul. Now those that are machmir with tzliya ubishul. Who is that? Give me some names.
Rivan.
Rivan.
Right. Yesh machmirim b'tzliya ubishul le'asor noten tam bar noten tam. There it says Rivan b'shem Rashi uba'aru klal lamedal hevi amordechai. Okay. V'aminhag le'asor lechatchila ubediavad mutar. What do you mean? Okay, so there's a big question. What does it mean? V'aminhag le'asor lechatchila. Le'asor what? Le'asor to do it, to take something that was boiled in a fleshik pot and put it in kutach, because, right? That's what's asur. Because that's otherwise, because the Machaber said you could do that. And he says, no, you can't do that. You can't take something that was boiled in a fleshik pot and put it and eat it with kutach. That's asur. But what does he add the word lechatchila? What does it mean lechatchila? Ubediavad mutar. So what is bediavad mutar? Bediavad mutar means, I'll just jump to the end because we have no time. Bediavad mutar means if it was mixed already with your kutach, if you had your eggs that were boiled in a fleshik pot and somebody mashed them up and mixed them with cottage cheese, now it's b'diavad. That's called b'diavad. You weren't supposed to mix it with cottage cheese because Nat Bar Nat is not good when it's bishul. Although the eggs we're going to see may be different because there's water there. But let's say, yeah, whatever. Well, actually, he's talking about it. What is his example? What was his example? Did he give me? He didn't say what his example was. But anyway, the eggs, let's say, you can't mix with cottage cheese. If you did mix with cottage cheese, it's mutter. We call inyan. V'davka le'echol im chalav v'abasar atzmo. That's only if we're talking about eating with cottage cheese. Aval iten bekli shelehem mutar. Who's that?
Yes.
Well, he says here, be'isr be'heter arach, but who does Nachum say it is?
That was
I made a deal. Let's go back there. Who was
that
it?
was
Balatruma, what was this?
Yeah, Balatruma.
Yeah.
It's also Balatruma. I think it's Balatruma. If you go back to that Beit Yosef that he brought the Balatruma, it's the Balatruma. That's that idea. That if you want, so that's that little heter I was saying. Remember I said there's like a little heter? Aval, liten bekli shelehen mutter. In other words, actually, no, I take it back. Because he was allowing you, the Balatruma was allowing you to start the whole process for the purpose of putting on a kli. Here is saying if it was already done, now you can put it on a kli. It's a little bit less of a kula. Okay. V'ken nagu v'ken im lo nitbashlu o nitzlu tchila rak alu b'kli shel basar muter lo chlan im hakutach. So that's the din of the Gemara. That he can't get away from. So that's kli sheni. So then you can eat with kutach, chalav atzmo. V'ken le'efen. V'ken im haya kli shenitbashel bo nitzlu bo lifgam. If it was an old pot, shelo haya ben yomo noagin heter l'chatchila. So far, he is not mentioned. Who's he possibly like? So far, at least. Rivan, like you guys said, Rivan. Not like who?
The Rambam.
No, not like everyone else, but not like the Rosh is what I'm saying. Not like the Rosh and say for a Truma. In other words, he's not saying that if there's water there, that's a kula too. He didn't say that so far. Okay. V'kol zeh kishamachal eno davar charif. Aval im haya davar charif kegon shebishlu davarim charifim v'kli shel basar. If you cook davarim charifim, it means that it's mostly charif. It can't be like Mexican or Texan chili that has a little bit of charif in it. If you're cooking mamash Tabasco sauce, so shebishlu davarim charifim v'kli shel basar afilu eno ben yomo. Eno ben yomo goes away. In other words, the fact that it's eno ben yomo, we said was a heter if you in combination with Nat Bar Nat. And now he's saying, but if it's harif and Nat Bar Nat and eno ben yomo, it's going to be still usher because the harif takes away the eno ben yomo. You understand, right? The harif takes away the eno ben yomo. And then the Nat Bar Nat, we're just left with Nat Bar Nat, and that's not enough because we hold like Riva. And now he said, wait.
It also does the Nat Bar Nat part of it though too, right? So even Deah avad, if it's harif, you couldn't do it. I mean, look at the Shach Zayin kind of says that, but
Shach Zayin. Afilu eno ben yomo de charufa de tavlin meshavye keilu iser ba'ain umashavye le ben yomo kidulakaman Siman. I like that. Kidulakaman Siman. Nitbaer de davka hamachal atzmo hu shu charif. That's what I was saying. It has to be Tabasco sauce. V'naseh l'sheva. Avalo mashvei akedera l'shva. Right. I don't see where you're saying what you're saying, but
I think because he says two things. Chorfe the tavlin mashvele ki'ilu ha isur be'ain. Right. So first, it makes the Nat Bar Nat as if it's actually the actual basar in the first place, and second is the
ki'ilu ha isur be'ain mashvele. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. It does two things. Right. We saw that. We're going to see that by the knife also. Yeah, good. Thank you. And then he talks about grinding it in a madok. That's also the same as cooking. He says if you tavlinim that you ground in a madok shel basar. Now the tikkun vav here says it should really be bashlu. So let's read it like that. That little vav there, it goes to the spine road, and it makes more sense if we read it as bashlu. Im bashlu b'chalav asur afilu b'diavad, because it's like this basar, it made it basar, even b'diavad. Ad de kashishim, it has to be shishim because it livened it, kind of like what the Shach said. Negative basar shebulova. Umekom hakom lo mikri ma'achal davar charif mishum ma'at tavlin shebo rak im kulo hu davar charif v'rubo kulo ayin kama. Okay. Nice. Here, let's look at Shach Gimel. That'll be our last thing. Shach Gimel. Haminag le'asor lechatchila. Haminag le'asor lechatchila lo'chlo b'kutach. U'b'diavad mutar im natan b'kutach. Aval lebashlan lechatchila b'kedei reshel basar. Kedei lo'chlan b'kutach asur afilu lo'machaber. That's what we saw. So in other words, you can't intend to eat your eggs with milk if you're cooking and cook them in a meat pot. Only if they did it already. Even according to the Machaber, he says. So let's summarize. Basically, the idea is that Nat Bar Nat, according to the Machaber, is even in Bish, he's like totally the most possible kula you could have. Doesn't matter if you're doing Bishul or Tzli, you only need 2 Nat Bar Nats, and then I'm going to explain what Nat Bar Nat is, and then even if you taste the flavor of the meat in the fish, you can eat it with your Kutach Habavli, because it's already kalush, as the Taz says in Taz Aleph. And the Ramah is much more machmir. The Ramah is much more machmir. He says, no, we need, if it's bishul, it's not going to be permitted. He's basically like the Rivan. He's adopting the Rivan. I'm not sure, right. And therefore, what about 3 levels of nat? So basically, the halacha is that if it's 3 levels of nat and it's still heter, then it's mutter. And that's going to come up in Sif Gimel. In Sif Gimel, we talk about cooking, about like putting a plate in a big Yoreh with water. And there's the machloket of whether the water becomes usher. Because, and I'll explain why. It's kind of like this. If there's an island in the middle of the sea, and the Portuguese and you get there first, then then they claim it for Portugal. And then if the British got there first, they claim it for Britain. But they both get there at the same time. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is to say they both got there by heter. Then they got there, at the moment they got there, the other side hadn't claimed it. So they can claim it. So therefore we can divide, therefore each of them has a valid claim to the island. There's another way of looking at it. At the moment when each one of them got there, they're both Isser. They're both Isser because there's another guy there, so they can't claim it. At the moment they both reach the island, the British guy there's a Portuguese guy there, so he can't claim it. And the Portuguese guy can't claim it because there's a British guy there. So they're both Ganavim. They're both stealing it. They're both not allowed to take it. So that's exactly the case in the Yoreh, because let's say you have a big pot and you have water in it, and now you put and they fleshik, and it's a fleshik Yoreh, let's say, and you're putting in milchik cups and dishes, and there's no mamashu. So now the water gets flavor from them. You could say like this: it's 3 levels of nat, because the meat goes into the Yoreh, and then the Yoreh goes into or 2 levels of nat, whatever. And then the Yoreh goes into the water, and the water is still heter, right? The water is still heter. The meat goes into the Yoreh, into the big pot, and then from the big pot into the water, and it's still heter. 2 knots, it's heter. And the other one is also true. The milk bowls, the milk went into the bowls, and then out of the milk bowls into the water is still heter. So if you view it that way, then you've got Nat Bar Nat the heter. But if you say no, but the milk and the meat came into the water simultaneously, so that's immediately created Isser. It's like the British and the Portuguese landing at the same time. They both are there illegitimately. So therefore it's Usser. So we'll see in Sif Gimel that there's 2 views of how to view that water. Is it Nat Bar Nat the Teira, or is it Nat Bar Nat the Isura? Hopefully we'll do that, Joel, in the Chazara. All right, Yishkoyach, everybody.
Shkach to you.
Correct.
Shkach.
Shavatam.
Next week is our last class, and we'll do the next Siman, Sadi Evav.
You're teaching, right, Rav Nachum, next week?
I'm teaching it.
And what's next year?
It'll
Next
be
year.
announced next week.
Okay.
Oh,
To great end.
okay.
All right.
Got your answer.
Two
All
good
right.
tell me.
It's a good one.
Okay, Lila.